Hello everybody, my name is Paul Simonik. I'm the site coordinator for the George Spangler Farm and Field Hospital, and I've got my good friend and historian Ron Kirkwood with me this afternoon, and we're going to talk a little bit about the farm, about some of the people that were here, the importance of this place, and probably most importantly, what you can do to help us make sure that we can preserve this for future generations and for people wanting to come out and learn a little bit a different side of the American Civil War story that they've heard before. So Ron, why don't we just talk a little bit first, about the Spanglers, okay?
Sure, Paul, thank you. George and Elizabeth Spangler bought 80 acres here in 1848, and when they purchased this farm, there was a log cabin on it, which they tore down, and they built a little two-story stone house for themselves and their children. Also on the farm was a log barn, which they tore down, but the Spanglers were recyclers, and they recycled some of the log cabin wood, and people who visit the farm today can actually see that same exact wood in this barn today. By 1863, George had grown his farm from 80 acres to 166 acres. Anytime land became available touching his farm, he bought it. So 166 acres in 1863, the time of the battle. 4 children, all still living at home, 2 girls, 2 boys, ages 19, 17, 21, and 14. The Spanglers had a thriving farm. They were community leaders. They grew corn, wheat, oat, hay, potatoes, sweet potatoes, garden vegetables. They had horses, beef cattle, dairy cattle, hogs, sheep, chickens. They were doing very well. George was a community leader. George was the president of the Cumberland Township School Board. He hired the teachers for Cumberland Township, and he donated land in the middle of his farm right over there for Granite Schoolhouse to be built. He was a justice of the peace. He was an elder in the church. He was on the Evergreen Cemetery Board. He was on the committee that inspected the almshouse every year. They were doing great, peaceful, idyllic property. Then on July 1st, 11th Corps medical staff write up, tell the Spanglers they've got to leave. I don't know how they persuaded them, but they persuaded them to let them stay on the condition that all 6 of them stay together in one upstairs bedroom out of the way. They could leave the house, but to do so they had to step over dying and wounded men. It's July, they're in this room for 5 weeks and 2 days, as long as the hospital is here. Obviously no air conditioning, no screens on windows, so the flies on a farm are bad. Magnify that how many times on a farm with a hospital. They went through a lot in those 5 weeks and 2 days.
From my perspective, I just can't imagine. They got up early on July 1st. Farmers get up early. They can hear noise off to the north and the west, hoping it's thunder, but knowing better. The war has come to Gettysburg. And at some time during the day, a contingent of Union medical personnel came down this very same lane that we did, and they said, we're going to use your farm as a field hospital. Not may we, not can we, not please. And all this beauty, all this investment, all this equity that they had in the farm, in the next 5 weeks, pretty much went right out the window. And the beautiful barn behind us, the Pennsylvania Bank barn, as many times as I've been in that barn, especially when I go up on the 2nd floor, up on the threshing floor, upwards of 400 to 500 wounded soldiers were lying on those floors recovering. And even on a 90-degree day, I go up there and I'm getting a chill now, to be honest with you, talking about it. So Ron, if you could you share with us a couple of stories of people that were here, if you would, please?
Sure. There was a surgeon, Henry Van Arnhem, who had a lot to do here. He was in charge of Armistead in the summer kitchen. He was in charge of his 154th New York boys. He was a brigade surgeon, so he was in charge of a lot of people. He was a state representative in New York before the war. He was a family doctor for a lot of the soldiers who were here in the battle. When he enlisted in '62, he developed chronic diarrhea, which was a deadly disease from the water, from the animal skins, their intestines laying around, just the horrifically poor, unsanitary conditions. And that's a kind of chronic diarrhea can last for 4 weeks at a time, and his lasted from 1862 to 1864. When he was here at Spangler, he was treating men in a very poor condition as he was trying to save lives. If he stood too long, it acted up. If he sat too long, if he rode in a wagon, it acted up. If he drank the wrong thing, if he ate the wrong thing. So he's trying to balance, trying to be comfortable while saving these guys' lives. So he survived the war, but this is what's really common. Even the survivors of the Civil War suffered for the rest of their life. He had chronic diarrhea the rest of his life, even while he was a U.S. House representative. 4 terms. Even when he was appointed to lead the Pensions Bureau, he was suffering. And around 1880, 1890, he said, I need 24-hour care all the time. And he wasn't wounded. He just got sick. And so many guys died from diarrhea, and he was a good example. While he was here, a soldier was here. There were 8 men in a tent out there from the 154th New York. 5 of them died. 2 had resections, which means they took some bone out. And Strickland actually had his arm amputated downtown, and he woke up during the amputation, and they were running out of medical supplies, and the surgeon said, "Oh, he's a grizzly dog." And Strickland said the bone saw wasn't as bad as the sewing up of the nerves and arteries and the skin. But he came out here, he was one of the 8 men in that tent that Van Arnhem took care of. He survived, went home, but when he got here to Gettysburg, he was already sick with lung disease from exposure. He could barely make it here. He walked, he fell behind the 154th, but he made it, went into battle, got shot, got his arm amputated, went home, continued to raise his family, but he only lived into his 40s, and he died of lung disease. Again, he didn't die of his wound, he just died of something he contracted during the war, and that was a common thing. And when a lot of these guys died, like they would be supporting a wife, and she would need to go on a pension. One guy here had 4 daughters, and when he died, she couldn't support him, so she farmed him out to other families. So that's the kind of things that these families faced, the moms faced, the children faced, things that happened to soldiers who were here.
See, that one of the things that I think we sometimes forget or don't really think about, the American Civil War ended in 1865. The fighting ended, but fighting for your life, fighting for your well-being, fighting to take care of your loved ones, fighting to get some kind of compensation for the sacrifices you've made, that went on for years and years and years. And that's a story that really needs to be told, which is why this farm is so important, the George Spangler Farm, because it gives us the foundation, an opportunity to tell the stories of individuals. Because there's more to the American Civil War than the colonels, the generals, the cannons, the rifles. There's everyday people, there's men, there's women, and there's an expression that I've never liked, and I'm going to use it now: the common, ordinary, everyday soldier. There's nothing common, ordinary, or everyday about anybody that volunteers to have somebody shoot at you. And this place filled with people that had that experience, and were able to tell this story.
The Gettysburg Foundation gave all historians and lovers of history and lovers of the battle a giant gift. They had the vision in 2006 to start negotiating to buy this property because the campground and some developers were interested in it. Barbara Finfrock was at the head of the line on that, coming out here to negotiate with the owners. By 2008, the owners said, "We want this farm saved," and they sold it to the Gettysburg Foundation for $1.8 million. But when they bought it for that, this wasn't a red farm.
No.
This was brown. Boards were gone everywhere. A strong wind was going to knock it down. The summer kitchen was overgrown. The smokehouse was all beat up. So after spending $1.8 million, the Gettysburg Foundation paid $3 million more. They raised the money. And now, because of the Gettysburg Foundation and their vision, If you want to know what this barn looked like in 1863, there it is. Except for these beams in the front, this is what it looked like when the 11th Corps Hospital was here. You can go back in time with this barn. You can go into that stable that was so bloody and filled with manure, and the nurses are in there holding the soldiers' hands, reading Bible passages to them, just trying to take their minds off their misery as they're about to die. Like you said, you can go upstairs and you can see where those guys laid shoulder to shoulder. Thanks to the Gettysburg Foundation and that $3 million raised, you can go into the summer kitchen, which looks just like 1863. You can walk in the door and stand on the exact spot where Armistead died, where he laid for 3 days, because we know now where he was in there. The smokehouse is 1863. The Gettysburg Foundation gave this gift to the world, and it took vision, it took a lot of time, and it took intelligence. They had an idea what they wanted, and now because the Gettysburg Foundation did that, people can come see this 1863 farm as it was. And I will always be grateful to the foundation for doing that, for allowing me to be a guide out here and allowing me to write 2 books about the place. It's been one of the joys of my life.
When I wrote Too Much for Human Endurance, I didn't know any descendants of George and Elizabeth Spanglers. So a year or 2 after that book came out, I decided to find them. I did a lot of genealogy, and it became one of the most fun researches that I had. I found them, I contacted them. At first they didn't return my calls or my messages, because who's this stranger contacting them out of the blue? But one descendant in each line got back to me. That opened the doors, and now we're having regular Spangler descendants gatherings at the George Spangler farm, where they're descended from. We had our first one in 2022, and descendants came here from 10 states, plus all over Adams County in Pennsylvania. They came from Kansas, California, Florida, everywhere. These descendants are excited to know that they're from this farm now. They had no idea, but they're taking pride in it now. So it's been a really fun circle getting to know the descendants of George and Elizabeth Spangler.
And for myself, speaking personally, this has been a privilege to be able to come out here to the Spangler farm, because there's just something special about this place that makes it so unique and different. And what I'd like to ask everybody is to consider, when you come to Gettysburg, come and visit the Spangler farm, and please support the work that we're doing here, because this is such an important place, and we want to make sure future generations have the opportunity to hear the stories that Ron is telling, that I'm telling, that our volunteer docents out here tell. So it's so important to continue the support to the Gettysburg Foundation for support of the Spangler farm and the other work that we're doing. And I just want to thank everybody that's come to Gettysburg over the anniversary, July 1st through the 3rd. And I want to especially thank everybody for their support of the work that we're doing here, and not just the Gettysburg Foundation, but the National Park Service. We're the philanthropic partner of the Park Service, and without your support, without your help, none of what we do could be possible. And again, thank you so much.